Perfect. Thank
We're
you.
down 2 members now with Carla resigning, or is somebody away?
What about Ian? Is Ian still around?
I sent him a text. I haven't heard back from him yet.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess given that we haven't heard from Ian, and we'll see whether he's coming or not, but we have quorum, so we can start, I would say. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just got the revised agenda. Thank you, Steph. Approval of the agenda, introduction of any late items. Anybody have anything to add?
What's the
motion to approve.
revised agenda?
I'm sorry, say again, Allison?
You said you just got the revised agenda.
Yeah, it landed in my email literally about 5 minutes ago.
Oh,
We realized
what-
the original one didn't have the financial plan attached to it.
that's all.
So I have to go and find that then. Okay.
But
All
I
right.
think you guys received it a couple days earlier though, and I sent it to you.
Yeah,
There's no
I've
change.
got yours, Kristen. I've got her.
I printed it all out, so that's why I was wanting to know
Yeah.
what was added, so what I had to go and look for.
Yeah, I think you're good. I think you're good,
Unfortunately, it's the colored one.
Allison. Okay. So we have a motion to approve the minutes. Did I see that, Glenn?
Yeah.
Seconder?
And second, Len.
Len second.
Len
All in
and Len.
favor?
Yep. Oh, hands up. Yep, there it is.
Okay, Roger check. Good. Thank you. Adoption of the November 17th minutes. I did see one thing that I thought should be changed, Steph, and that is way down in the section under dam sealing. Right in the middle of the paragraph, it says, quote, and as such not was, end quote, it
That's
should
a
be,
mouthful.
was, yeah, exactly. And as such was not. So just change not was to was not, and I think we're good
Right.
from my perspective. Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Seeing nothing, so.
Motion to adopt 2 minutes.
Thank you, Glenn.
Second,
Len
Members.
seconds.
second.
In favor, say aye.
All right.
Good. Okay, so that's done. Thank you. Next up is public comments. So we only have one member of the public attending, it looks like. Is that correct?
That's what I have, or what I'm seeing, yes.
Okay. And Astrid, I see your name there. Do you have anything you'd like to add or discuss or talk about?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just listening in.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that section can be closed. Moving on to section 4, elections of chair and vice chair. I'm willing to stand again, and Glenn?
Yes, Glenn says yes.
Glenn's willing to stand as vice chair, so if you guys will have us.
Absolutely.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye. We maintain same executive.
Aye.
Okay, so the election is done. Finance, Kristen, yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be bringing forward a rate recommendation this year that continues with the same rate structure that was supported by the committee last year. I am recommending, however, that we increase the base flat rate by $50 from $550 to $600, and that as well that we also implement increases to the volumetric rates starting at 12% and climbing up to 18% for the very last fourth tier. The goal here is we need to increase revenue. We need to increase user rates by about $10,000. And we're trying to increase the parcel tax by about $5,000. In real terms, we need this money to get started on the project. We've got some design work to do this year. And we also need to ensure that there's sufficient reserve funds to deal with water main replacements and equipment replacements in the 3 to 5 year term. So I will let Patrick speak to the project in a little bit, I'll just kind of go over the financial plan quickly. With this project, we'll be able to access the deferred revenue contribution charges that we've been holding in trust for Eagle Cliff for several years now. Those are fees that were collected as new properties joined the system over many years. There's about $43,000 there that can be used to support this capital project work. The operations budget is increasing overall by about 12% year over year. We've included an additional allocation this year of admin time in recognition of the proportionate time that's spent on utility projects. And those costs are all distributed proportionally among all of the systems. We did suffer some investment losses on our investments that are held with the Municipal Finance Authority. They're held in a short-term bond fund, and like bond funds everywhere all over the world in 2022, they took a hit. And we have been working very closely with Finance Committee. We're monitoring their performance monthly. Our plan is to hang on to them pending a recovery in the short term of those underlying value of the securities. They are earning a good distribution each month, so that's great. But just as those underlying bonds mature and they're replaced with newer bonds that are a more current interest rate, then the value of those underlying securities is going to come back. So they're not actual losses. We didn't sell any of the units, so we didn't incur any of the losses, but we do, under accounting rules, we have to book the value at year end. So that's why you do see a loss in 2022. But again, it's a paper loss. It's not an actual loss. And as soon as we are able to recoup that investment, that capital gain back, we're going to divest ourselves of all of those units and move them into something more of a GIC or something, because interest rates are just so good at the moment. So we want to make sure that we take advantage of those. The capital project is estimated to, the early design work will likely cost about $200,000 to get the plans ready to submit to do some design work on that. The total cost of the capital project is about $2.3 million. And if that grant is successful, we anticipate that the grant will cover up to $1.5 million of the cost. And that at that time, when we know more about the outcome of the grant application, we can come forth with a proposal for a longer term financing strategy to repay that debt over a number of years using a new parcel tax. I think that of the total $2.3 million, that would mean that the Eagle Cliff residents would be required to fund about $720,000 of that project. So probably next year, when we know more about the project, we will be coming back with a financing plan that includes an additional parcel tax, which you can see we put in the financial plan just to signal that. And I think I did I estimated that over a 10-year repayment term, because you don't want to stretch a $720,000 debt over too long a period. You end up just paying way too much interest. So I think I considered amortizing that over a 10-year period for that. As I said, we'll wait till we hear back and we know more about the grant and the capital project. But I think I'll turn it over to Patrick to talk about that, or if you had any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them.
I see Glenn's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So just a couple of questions for you, Chris, if you don't mind. The $43,000 you say that's sitting in reserve to be used towards the capital project comes from connection fees. Is that correct?
Yeah, was it a $3,000 connection fee that was?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that sum, but they were established in a way that they come from the old improvement district model. They're called capital eligible charges, and they can only be used when it comes time to expand the system. So given that we have a potential project to connect the system to Cove Bay, that would be an eligible use of those funds, and we could finally access them. So
the $3,000 connection fee, has that ever been adjusted, or is that something that's set in stone? How does that work?
It was an old Eagle Cliff Improvement District bylaw that when we incorporated as a municipality, we inherited it. So it's just been on the books since then. And
it's never changed?
Yeah.
Okay. I should know this off the top of my head, but how many connections are in Eagle Cliff? Does anybody know that?
I think there's 110.
110. Okay. And just to clarify, then the increases that you're suggesting for the parcel tax and for the revenue, that's all those increases are earmarked for the capital project, not for operating costs. Is that correct?
Well, they're earmarked. We have operating costs estimated to be increasing by 12%. So some of it's related to that. But really the long-term goal here is that we need to boost those reserve funds. So everything that's unspent is going into those reserve funds. Oh, hi, Ian.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
Okay. Hey, Ian.
Hi.
Tim, did you have any questions of Kristen?
I don't have any specific questions about the budget, and I'll hold my questions off regarding the project until I hear more from maybe Patrick, rather than starting down that path.
Okay.
I have a question. Kristen, just for simplicity's sake, if I have a neighbor ask, well, what's going on with everything? Is there, out of that budget, can you give the numbers that are really just what a house owner interested in? So how much will if it is a 10-year repayment, just to ballpark it, and it's not, I know some of you don't want to be careful because it gets written in stone kind of thing, but just the simple set of numbers that we can use if we're communicating with our neighbors. And just
I don't want to pull a number off the top of my head without doing it, but I can do it while we're on the capital project, and I'll get back to you before the end of the meeting, and I'll give you
know
the
what I mean?
number.
It's really helpful because
yeah, sure.
we don't care all. I take Pat. We don't. It's not we care a lot, but it's just that way you've got a number and you say, okay, thanks, Kristen.
I'll look it up. I'll get back to you.
Yep.
Okay.
So I've just got one question. Is the 85,800 parcel tax entirely for servicing debt? Or is it?
Oh, yeah. So I guess there's your number, 858 by, or 850 or so by 110.
Divide by 110 households.
Yeah.
Let me go back and through my other notes and make sure I did.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So on that front, Kristen, and thanks for Allison for bringing that up. Are we including the households between Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay as part of that number, or how does that work?
At the moment, I haven't. I don't know. I would. I mean, they have been polled. They have been asked, "Are you interested?" If any of them join, they will become part of the mix. And there's also going to be a fee that needs to be determined that they're going to have to pay to get onto the system. We haven't done any of that work at this point, but I can assure you that that would be the approach that we would take. And then, yeah, they would.
So if we use that 85.8 as our number for now for budget and discussion, right now that's for 110 households. We can divide it evenly. But if we had 40 more households just pulling a number out of the sky, joining us, then that becomes divided by 150. It's not that number goes up, it's that each share goes down. Is that correct?
Well, I guess I'm going to ask Patrick, would those properties be part of the Cove Bay system, or would they be part of the Eagle Cliff system? It's kind of
everything
an agenda item to talk about in the discussions that are going to have to come up. But sorry, I cut you off, Patrick.
Everything would be part of the Cove Bay system.
Okay.
That would be the simplest and preferred approach. There's other ways that could be arranged, but that would be, I think, the starting point for discussion.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm going to hold off until we get into Patrick's before I get to.
But just so I can understand, this phase one of the connection, which is the $2 million, is going to be on Eagle Cliff.
Yes. No.
It would be on Eagle Cliff plus, however, whatever other properties are participating in connecting to the new main. Right.
But if this work gets underway before we have that information, like my understanding was the phase one upgrades to the Eagle Cliff system includes our, the water mains in the ground for the Eagle Cliff section. And then when it comes time for the new connections to happen, that's where you would factor in the value of our assets, I guess, in regards to the connection fees. Is that how it works?
Well, that's what we have to figure out. So in terms of connecting the two systems, what's a fair contribution for essentially having access to the Cove Bay water system, and more, most significantly, the Cove Bay water treatment plant. So there, I mean, there's lots of questions and ways that could be looked at around the distribution system. When it comes to the treatment plant itself, which we expect to be operating very soon, there's been different financing sources for that. So there was a grant, there was a contribution from the developer, there was long-term financing, so there was debt financing, and then there was a portion that was paid by the Cove Bay users, so their reserves, plus a portion of the debt that's already been paid off. Then this is just my thoughts on that, without having had the joint discussions with, with the two systems. It's not something that everyone's agreed to, but it seems to me it would be fair to say that Eagle Cliff and the other properties joining the system would contribute to that amount that was paid, which is.
Yeah. So that's I guess the root of my question. So what we're talking about is a budget for the upgrades to the connection, but there's going to be another cost to Eagle Cliff residents in regards to the connection fee to Cove Bay.
The expansion fee, yeah.
Yeah, and then as well, any latecomers coming to the new system, there'd be another calculation for them. Is that right? So when we talk about the upgrades and the amount per household as far as contributions to the upgrades, that's just the first number. Then there is another connection fee that we're going to have to, and there's no idea on what that would be at this point.
Well, I have some general idea in looking at it the way I've just described, and I don't have firm numbers on what the amount that was paid by the Cove Bay users was, somewhere around $1 million, and if you divide that by essentially how many single family equivalent homes are there in the whole system, Eagle Cliff plus Cove Bay, it's about 910.
And then the other ones in the middle?
Well, I'm just leave those out for a minute. So that's about 1,100 per property, if you looked at it that way. And that's subject to confirming those numbers. Like maybe it's 1,500. It's that kind of range, though, that would seem to be
that's
fair.
That's a real interesting number, Patrick, and I want to put that as a benchmark, because I know when we started these discussions back a couple of years ago, the latecomers connection fee to Cove Bay was more akin to $10,000, I recalled.
Well, it's about 13,000 if someone just comes in wanting to add a property to the system.
Yes.
So, but that's not really the situation here, where you've got existing assets, you've got a new connection that's being partly paid for by the system.
I'm really pleased that there's recognition of that, because that's been sort of our position, or my position, all along, and I'm not sure that the Cove Bay water system LAC necessarily agreed with my interpretation. So I'm glad to see that and hear that you're coming to that conclusion as well. That's very encouraging.
It's not a conclusion at this point, but it would seem like, okay, if we look at this amount, 800,000 was paid by Cove Bay reserves, and since the debt financing was incurred and there was an internal borrowing as well, a certain amount of that has been paid back already. So that's an amount that should be reimbursed essentially for
our share
properties joining the system. And then Eagle Cliff would also be accepting for the remaining debt, which financed part of the project. By becoming part of the system, you have a share of that debt. So that wouldn't make sense to include that twice, right?
Understood. So before, any other questions before I?
No.
Okay. So in terms of the budget as presented by Kirsten, or Kristen rather, sorry, I don't get them backwards. Do you need a motion and an agreement to accept it? And I'm going to suggest, I do have a problem with identifying the project as proceeding. If I looked at the budget, the 5-year capital plan, and as it strictly is, my assumption is the project is going ahead, head down and keep running and don't stop till we're done. And I don't know that we're there yet. I think from the community's perspective, we're still in a wanting to wait and see the outcome of the grant submissions, I think, before perhaps there's a willingness to just jump on and say, yes, proceed and have this as part of the capital plan. And Glenn, Len, you want to add to that at all, or am I off base from your perspective?
I'm fully in favor of moving forward with the design process, but yeah, I think that without the question being answered in regards to the grant funding, I think that's a big, for me, that's the big question. And I don't know how much longer we do have to wait. I would have assumed that those answers would be pretty forthcoming pretty soon. Allison, do you have know anything about that?
Well, hopefully we'll hear in the next month or two. But is there any impact to the current year's budget, Kristen, if as far as getting the grants concerned? Because by the timing, if we go ahead with the design and there's reserve funds for that, there's not a real impact one way or the other on the current year.
We've got it funded from proposed that we would do interim financing initially for some of it. There is sufficient reserves to do it if we agree that we should move ahead with it regardless.
Yeah.
But given that we expect the grant announcement to be imminent, so if it's not successful, then I suggest we come back and figure out what the short 3 to 5 year plan is in that respect. If it is successful, then we can go ahead with what we've got in the plan without any concerns about amending budgets or anything. So
yeah, so this is sort of basically saying yes to this year 2023 budget.
Yeah, we're kind of treading water.
Or on would be entirely amended depending on the outcome of the grant application.
And I know this is our second kick at the can with this grant. Is this a grant that's available to apply for every year?
It's a different pot this time from the last one.
It's not available every year. Why don't I just go through what the timelines for the project could look like? This seems to be a lot of the questions revolving around that.
I don't know that there's timelines or questions on the timeline so much as questions on the availability of external money.
Well, of course, that's a question, but we have to, we have to look ahead at how we might proceed when we get word about this imminently, right? Like there's a lot of considerations. So we're not talking yet about spending money on construction at all, or even design, but we need to look at, assuming that things are favorable, then what do we do? If we haven't allowed for that in our budgeting, then it makes it a lot more difficult. And so I don't know, why don't I just go through, I've got a couple slides about the project. And then if we can address the questions after that, if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
So in terms of time frame, we were told spring 2023, and then more recent, feedback is that yes, spring probably means May. So, within, a month or two, hopefully less, we'll obtain final grant approval. Then there would be a need to move into a process to permit the borrowing for the local service areas portion of the project, and that would take several months. So this is an optimistic timeline, assuming that things, we make decisions to proceed and things go according to plan. So then we would be in this scenario, we're not actually starting spending money on design until we've got the assent for borrowing. There would be a possibility that could be advanced with reserve money. That would be another option. But if you waited till borrowing was in place, then you're looking at September to December for design of the water mains and culverts, and I'll explain that in a minute. There's about 10 culverts along the proposed connecting water main route that it makes no sense to install a new water main over old culverts that are at the end of their life and a risk. So that would have to be integrated as part of the project. That would be a municipal portion of the project, running into the same thing with the water main projects in Blue Water. Then you'd be looking at early 2024 for tendering and procurement. And it's feasible that you could be looking at construction for water mains and culverts in the latter part of from March to the end of 2024. That's a feasible time frame. It requires a number of things to go right. Of course, the external financing being the big one.
Sorry, Patrick, just to ask the question, the assent for financing, I'm assuming that process is going to look very similar to that of Blue Water?
I would expect so, yes.
In terms of it's an assumed positive unless there's a petitioned against in more than 50% of the property owners and value. Is that correct?
Yeah, for us, it's a better way of doing it. We don't have to hold a referendum. We don't have to pay people and book the school and sit there, and we could do it here, but like it has to be done on a Saturday. So we have to get staffing. We have to order ballots. Like there's a lot of cost to holding a referendum. And for local service areas, it's a more efficient and a more cost-effective way of getting elector assent.
Okay, but that's the process that you're anticipating it going forward with.
We would discuss it with staff just to make sure we're all on the same page. But I would make that recommendation. I think it's not worthwhile to spend the money to hold a referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Just one wrong questions. I've got one quick one about the culverts, because I know we've talked about this in the past, and I'm all for certainly replacing culverts. It just makes sense if you've got machines there and you're digging up to do the culverts. I'm just wondering, how does that get budgeted? I mean, obviously, when you're tackling these two projects at once, there's savings, I would assume, with mobilizing equipment and all that kind of stuff. Who gets savings? Is it allocated towards the culverts or the water mains? And are these numbers, how do you factor in all of the questions? If the municipality was to embark on a project of just doing the culverts in Eagle Cliff, would that be the number, $550,000?
What we would probably be doing is hiring, when we hire consultants for design work and when we hire contractors for construction work, there would be prices for the water main portion and the culvert portion. And, overall, those prices might be less because they're integrated projects. The main driver is that, a lot of these culverts are quite bad, and if you install a water main and don't address the culverts, then you have to go back in there and deal with protecting the water main and redoing the water main essentially. So it's really not, they really have to be done.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I'm just wondering when it comes to, I mean, they can assign costs to how many, the cost of the culverts and the time allotment to change the culverts, but all the costs in regards to mobilizing equipment and flaggers and all that kind of stuff. Does that get split, or does it all end up in one bucket? Is my question really.
Yeah, I mean, the mobilization, we would have to come up with I think we can have different pricing or separate pricing. You have a tender, they have to submit a bid price for the water main and a bid price for the culvert portion. They're going to have, mobilization cost and insurance cost and things that are subject to both aspects of the project. And we would probably prorate that based on the relative value. That would be how I would look at it. So, I mean, what I've shown here is the approximately 1.3 kilometers of new water main that would be required to connect the north end of the Cove Bay system to Eagle Cliff. And there's, as you can see, a number of properties along the way, many of which would likely be interested in connecting as well. The culvert locations are shown, and they would be, addressed as a integrated municipal project. And based on communications we've had from the grant administrators, our expectations are that the chances for obtaining a grant for this connection portion shown here are good, and the chances of obtaining the grant money for the other components of the project that we submitted for, which was replacement of upgrading of water mains within Eagle Cliff system and installing a new larger reservoir tank at the high zone site, that our chances were less good for, and we did submit it as 3 phases, indicating that this was the high priority and one that achieves more points in how they evaluate successful grants. So that's why we're looking at this component of the project. If we get grant approval and can proceed immediately with the assent process for the borrowing, we could move forward with design for both the water mains and culverts in 2023, and then construction in 2024. And so that's assuming that grant funding is obtained, there's about 760,000 of cost that has to be financed through borrowing, or a combination of borrowing and reserves. And of course, any properties that participate in the project would lower that.
Can I just ask, sorry, the red line is new water main.
Yes.
The existing water main for Eagle Cliff, I can't see it on the small screen. Where does it start?
Just south of Upland Trail.
And so that is also being replaced though, correct?
Not as part of this project. That would have to be done at some point. We did apply for that as part of the overall project. We've just been advised that this is our best shot. So
I understand. Was that part of a phase 2 or phase 3? I'm just trying to refresh my memory here on that.
Yeah, I think we identified it as phase 2 being reservoir, and phase 3 being water, distribution system upgrades within Eagle Cliff.
Patrick, the system that exists in Eagle Cliff, is it durable enough for, say, a decade or more as it is? Because I realize we're not going to be able to take advantage of fire insurance because of the sizes. But can we count on it working another 10 years, or will all the hydrants fail at some point? Or
I don't know.
Oh.
I think we have had one major leak in recent years along Eagle Cliff Road. That was a result of a poorly constructed section of main, which wasn't bedded properly, and a rock pierced the main. So we don't really know how much more of that there is. There hasn't been a lot of, and there's definitely some sections of water main that are, under like down Williams, under people's patios, and
I understand.
really unknown. But we would have to look at I think you wouldn't get fire insurance upgrade and rating until a larger tank was provided. One of the big limitations on the fire flows and the rating of the system was the 3-inch section of 3-inch line from the reservoir, which wouldn't be a factor anymore with under this scenario.
Right. Thank you.
So
I'm sorry, why would it not be an issue?
Yeah.
Because the water is, this is the line from Eagle Cliff Reservoir down to the system is undersized.
Oh, okay, I see. So once the pipe's big enough.
Well, this is a 6-inch pipe, which is
sufficient.
May not be able to deliver full fire flows to the far end of the system, but is a substantial improvement.
Okay.
So that's we haven't, as you can see, we haven't really advanced other than having a high level look at timeframes and budgets. We haven't advanced the design work beyond last time we talked. And when we get our grant word, we'll reconvene very soon after that, and confirm this plan or make a new plan. The other item that was I can stop there if there's anything more you want to discuss about.
So Patrick, what I'm hearing is that based on that schedule, there is not necessarily an advantage to committing to spending $200,000 of our capital money or our available funds to further advance the plans, specs, and tender package at this point. Is that correct? Or am I interpreting what you said there and your schedule correctly?
Well, there is an advantage in that I've assumed in the schedule that I showed you, I've assumed we hear about the grant in May, we go through the elector assent process, and then we don't start design until September of this year. If you were to start and then that leads you to potentially finishing the project by the end of 2024. If you were to start the design in April instead of September, then you've advanced the whole project by several months.
Yes and no. I mean, we still have the assent issue that has to be attached. So we'd still be waiting for that. I guess one thing that I wonder about, if I assume a pessimistic role for a second and say that our grant proposal for even phase 1 is not approved, are we limited to going back again? Do we need more information to go back again? Do we have more time to get that information? I guess I'm trying to still look at the worst case scenario and say, okay, how can we better our position?
There may be some work. I think we've advanced the project to the level that is generally the minimum expected for these types of grant programs. It's always, I'm sure they always like to see better information, and that's always helpful. I don't know that there isn't a this isn't an every year grant. I don't know of another program at the moment that we would apply to. I mean, we would, yeah, so I don't know.
So what I'm hearing is if this does not go through, the potential of another grant landing or another opportunity for grant application landing, it may not occur.
You never
Well-
know. They make announcements all the time, and we'd have to go back and look at the federal budget to see what they put in the infrastructure fund, and there's certainly been discussion about increasing the gas tax fund too. So
Yeah, I don't.
Does any of the recent money the municipality just received in regards to infrastructure upgrades get earmarked for this? Or is that undetermined?
we haven't decided. If you looked at Kristen's budget proposals, we're putting it away and holding it until we know more certainly about everything.
About community center and all of those other
Yeah.
obligations that we have that we don't quite have all the funding confirmed for yet.
Well, I thought this was specific for infrastructure improvements that was being.
It's not, it's called Growing Communities Funding, and it's very, very broad-based funding, but ideally it's to help communities fund the cost of growth and providing amenities, providing infrastructure. Really, most projects are eligible, most capital projects are eligible.
Okay.
Just a quick question in regards to the overall budget of 2.1, what the level of confidence is in regards to that number. And if we do go through the elector assent for the extra 720 and gets approved and then we need more money, how does that work? How does it all work if we're over budget?
The grant funding is based on the budget that's submitted. So if things go over budget, that you don't get a increase in your grant amount.
No, but do you have to go back for another round for the elector assent kind of thing? Is it based on a specific number?
Are you going to update the estimates before we go for elector assent, Patrick? Because
well, the estimates are they do they're based on a 50% design, sort of the Class C estimate. They include a healthy contingency. They've been escalated based on a 2024 construction start. So and that's what the grant application was based on. In terms of the risks of overruns and how that's managed, guess it depends on the extent of it. If it's something that can be dealt with by using reserves, or if it's a magnitude that requires additional borrowing. But I think the borrowing we would.
Also, Patrick, it also makes sense to use that interim borrowing approach and actually ask for more than what we think we need. And then using the interim borrowing approach, we can just take money incrementally and only use what we actually need. And with them knowing that if there was an overage that we had gone for the assent for the higher amount. So I think we've learned some lessons about asking for local service area borrowing. And I think making sure that it's communicated properly, that people know this is the amount that we think we need. We're adding X amount for contingency, given the inflationary pressures on construction projects and knowing how many of them are coming back more than we thought. We are going to ask for this much, but it will only be accessed in the event that we needed it to deal with a cost overrun on one of the contracts. So we have a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay. So if I'm going to try and wrap this up and bring us back onto the agenda, in terms of the operation plan for water consumption and the parcel tax increase up to the $500 up from $400. I think, and Len, I haven't heard from you specifically on this. I think we probably are comfortable enough with that. I know that I'm not quite comfortable yet with the capital projects still sitting there with potential funding without the grant, results being known yet. So I'd like to see that adjusted or moved or commented on. in some way or shape, shape or form.
Tim,
Yep.
in the budget, it's funded through debt. So
You don't get the debt, the project doesn't go.
yeah, so that needs a letter of sense. So if that puts any peace of mind in you, then.
Well, it kind of, frankly, it doesn't, because I don't have the same degree of confidence in the voter assent process. I mean, I know that it makes it an easier process to follow and a less costly process to implement, but I think it may get approved accidentally. If I can say that, due to apathy, shall we say, and I'm sort of reluctant to put my stamp to that, if you will. But that's me personally, and the way I see things. So I don't know, guys. What I'll throw the floor open.
So you're not concerned about the elector assent failing. You're concerned about not everybody actually putting their X on a piece of paper to say, I'm in favor of this.
I'm in favor, or I'm not in favor specifically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
so suddenly we owe $2.4 million divided by 110 households because nobody said no.
Because 75 householders didn't pay attention to the thing. Well,
Exactly.
That's where you guys have lots of email contacts and whatever, and we'll give you a package to send out and make sure people pay attention to. But otherwise, we're paying a whole bunch more money.
No, I understand that, and I understand that it's a big role for us, and I also understand that I met with the ECA community board last night, who are also concerned with this. So I'm voicing that concern on behalf of the community members that I have spoken with already. Anyway.
It's also very hard to answer the questions of the community with the information we have access to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so without having answers, I'm reluctant to just say, yeah, okay, go ahead, throw that in the budget, leave it there. We'll address it at some point in the future when we know more. But in the meantime, we've said, yeah, go ahead, approve it. And that's hard for me anyways.
But if we don't put it in the budget, we're misleading people, and because we're not showing that we're planning on moving ahead with the project. So people will say, well, you haven't got the project in the budget for next year.
That's what confused me, to tell you the truth, Allison, is how we had the number in the budget without a firm understanding of where the revenue is coming from. Because that was my question in regards to the sewer upgrades as well, is that we couldn't put it into the 5-year budget because we don't know where the money's coming from. So I wasn't sure if this was, I thought when I looked at this, I thought, oh, the grant was approved. So.
It's quite a bit different than the sewer situation in that there's a funding source that we're making a budget based on obtaining that funding source. That's the scenario that we're budgeting for. If that scenario doesn't transpire, then that budget isn't valid.
Except that the written narrative by Kristen in her brief suggests that the recommendation from you guys is to proceed with the project even if the grant is not approved. And again, that to me is flying in the face of what we're saying.
So I think it would be appropriate then to make a recommendation that the LAC doesn't support moving forward with the project unless the grant is approved.
Yeah, you can put that in as a separate motion. We've done that in the past with things at council.
Okay.
Well,
Glenn, any other comments?
Well, no, I think this is one that because I agree with what you were saying initially, Tim, about, what happens if, but this is pretty fundamental. We've got to do something with this water system. We don't know what could happen. And maybe the best thing, if you want to get people on board, is that we run out this year. You know what I mean? Like we get a 90-day drought or 110-day drought, whatever. And suddenly, when that water, you turn your tap and nothing comes out. Somebody say, what's going on? At some point, we've got to commit to this because water is fundamental to making this community have growth, right? I mean, so like I said, I've come to say, I say take a chance, because we still will be in the same spot when if we don't get the grant, because it'll come to a grinding halt, but at least the momentum is there.
Yeah. I'd like to see the project advance to the design stage. I really think that we need, just as Len says, I mean, you can't just do nothing at this point. I think where the clock is ticking on this system, I'm very concerned about, and maybe Kristen can answer this question too, because I didn't ask it, but the 200,000 for design, I understand that the 43,000 is going to be put towards that. Is the balance of that made up of the reserve funds that are currently in the system? And are we left with nothing to maintain the current system while we go through this project upgrade?
You've got borrowing funding at looking at this.
I've got borrowing starting using an interim borrowing model, but I think shoot, where's that financial plan? Does it say 300 in reserve?
It's got 200 for transfer to capital fund.
I thought I saw 300 and some odd thousand in the capital.
313.
Yeah. So there's sufficient money there to fund it, and then what we're going to have to do is work on another plan to figure out a financing strategy to get on with the project, or get on with a remediation project if this is not the approved solution.
So looking at the budget for 2023, you've got proceeds of debt as a revenue source.
Yeah.
And a transfer to the capital fund of 200,000.
Yeah.
But picking up, if for some reason the borrowing didn't get approved, then would we be better to plan right now to pay for the design work out of reserves?
At this point, I think that it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If we have to change direction, we can do an amendment at that point. I don't want to change based on, I don't want to change because that's going to change what is already been brought forward in the council report. I think that if the grant isn't approved, then we're back at square one and we have to come up with a new project plan, financing plan, and we need to meet and sort that out. I mean, what's important that we get adopted at this meeting is approval of the rates, because if the rates aren't approved, then we need to approve a different rate or.
Okay, so how about to try and shorten this a little bit, because I think we could go on for a while. Can we strip out the part of the budget that is about the rates, make a motion to accept and at least move forward with that portion? Is that workable for everybody?
You can have two separate motions. You can sever it into two. So you could vote on that one first.
Ian, you haven't said too much on
questions are getting answered here
okay.
For the most part.
Before we go to the recommendations and the motions, Patrick, do you mind just updating us on where we are with the provincial dam safety officer? Are things still just on hold? Is he just kicking back waiting for us to, what's the deal there?
Okay, yeah, we've advised him of our time frame, and that, you know, we're expecting to hear about this grant money, and we'll have firm timelines following that. So he's aware of that, and he's expecting that, you know, following, you know, after May, we'll be coming back with a plan on how we're dealing with the existing dam.
And what are the repercussions in that regard if we don't get the grant and we don't commit to the borrowing, and we're in a holding pattern again? What are the repercussions with the dam in that regard?
Well, we're legally required to do something, to decommission it or to proceed with keeping it in service and doing all the work required to make sure that it's safe. The preference would be to move, if we're moving forward with the connection project, and least cost would be to decommission the dam and essentially restore natural drainage patterns. There was always a small lake there, a small pond there. We've visited the site with CREAS and talked to them about a plan. They've had discussions, just preliminary discussions with environmental and geotechnical consultants, and they were really wanting to, before really committing to what would be required, to see more of information about the original condition of the site, and to have discussions with the dam safety office of the province, and also the permitting authorities that would be doing the Water Sustainability Act approvals for altering water courses. So that's something that we would need to look into for a decommissioning scenario.
None of that is included in the 5-year plan as far as budgets for decommissioning or anything like that.
Not yet, no.
Oh, I thought there was a $10,000 number that I saw in the budget. Kristen,
just a little thing that we've carried forward to work on an operations and maintenance policy. It's that if the dam is not decommissioned, we are required to have that policy. So that
I don't think $10,000 might cover CREAS's next visit, but that's about it.
Well, they have given us a proposal for the initial steps, which would be it was about 7,500, I think, the initial review and preliminary designs looking at restoring the initial the natural condition, and then the initial discussions with the province. So that would be, the initial portion of developing a dam safety plan and design would be funded from that.
Okay. All right. Are we okay with then coming back again to the making a motion to A, sever the operations from the capital side of the budget, and B, do we want to make a motion to accept the increases as proposed by Kristen on the consumption fees and the parcel tax?
Yeah, Kristen, is that all you would need for to move yourself forward with your 5-year plan? Is basically the user fees and the parcel tax at this point?
Ideally, we need the 5-year financial plan as a whole. So again, I suggest that with that caveat, that secondary recommendation says that the LAC does not support moving forward with the design work pending an unsuccessful grant application. We're not gonna go ahead and start doing anything without coming back to you guys and talking to you, say, hey, what's the next step? Like, we're not gonna move forward with anything until we have another conversation if the grant is not successful. So it's in there, it allows us to begin the process, and if it's not successful, then we're back to figuring out where we're going to go from here. So I think,
well, could you use the wording that the Eagle Cliff Water System LAC recommends to council that the draft Eagle Cliff Water System be approved and included with the municipality's 5-year financial plan, with the understanding
that would work
that if the grant is not successful, the design phase will be
Revisited.
That works. Yeah, that would work.
Okay. So Steph, are you working on writing up a motion to that effect?
And just from a process perspective, I would vote on the user rate and parcel tax increases first, because otherwise you got to change the revenue line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you guys looking in the chat, you know?
Actually got a message from a resident in Eagle Cliff, said he's put a chat in the YouTube chat. Is there?
There is, oh,
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Chat
There's
or the
more
Zoom
chat.
chat?
Okay.
Okay, I see it here. Thank you, Steph.
Oh, no,
That
no,
the-
it's new. There's a new one. Here, I can put it on a Word
There it goes.
document.
It
and share
just came
to you
up.
as well.
Okay, I got it here. So if I read it, it says that the Eagle Cliff Water System Local Advisory Committee recommend to council that the draft Eagle Cliff Water System 5-year financial plan be approved and included with the Bowen Island Municipality 5-year financial plan, with the understanding that if the grant is not successful, that the design phase of the Eagle Cliff / Cove Bay water connection project will not be initiated, and that the Eagle Cliff Water System Local Advisory Committee support the plan for 5-year user rate and parcel tax increases as recommended by staff. So are we recommending a 5-year
Yeah.
on user rate and the parcel tax as well? Or I thought that would be year by year.
We do them year by year. We're legislative required to do a 5-year plan. So that's what we have to do, but that's not in practice what we do. We
Okay,
do it every year.
So if we added to that, however,
you'll get another kick at the can next year.
understood, just saying somewhere that we should write in there that it's reviewed annually or something.
Well, no, but that's just part of the process. It's standard.
Okay.
You do the year 1 budget and then you have to present the next 4 years. So,
Okay.
have you got a recommended increase for the next 4 years in there?
Well, I've got a presumption that the debt financing will be successful and that there will be additional parcel tax requirements. So that's, and then
yeah, this is not a carte blanche to spend for as laid out for the next 5 years. It'll get revisited every year.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to. I don't really support the idea that if the grant's not successful, that we will not move forward with the design phase.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I thought the wording I had suggested said would be revisited.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Just, that if the grant is not successful, will
the timing of the design phase will be revisited.
Are you guys looking at the recommendation now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that looks better to me. Anybody else?
And just to clarify there, if we, as a scenario, if the grant is unsuccessful and if there's an opportunity to apply for the same grant next year, and we do move forward with design during that time, that design is still relevant regardless of when the funding comes in. Is that correct?
No, they don't fund things that you've started.
Yeah, it's relevant, but they will not backdate.
We wouldn't actually, it's not actually eligible in this case. I mean, we were under this understanding that it was eligible to be funded. In the more recent discussions we've had with the people with the grant program, it's not. It would be, so the grant would fund up to, I think, 73% of the construction cost, but not the design cost.
Okay, so
we're under the impression that that having a design phase completed would add to your likelihood of getting a grant. Is that not correct in this situation?
I think it does help. Sure. Yeah. Better design is always preferred.
So Glenn, I think just if we play this out for a second, if we are going to know sometime in the next month or so,
we can't wait for council's timeline to approve the 5-year financial plan.
Understood, but I'm looking at the wording as we have, and I think this leaves it open enough that if we hear in the next month or so that the grant is not approved, we have time to revisit and then commit to our using our reserve funds, do we not? And still be able to, put together a submission for next opportunity?
We'd have to
I-
amend the financial, I mean, I'm thinking of Kristen's timeline. It's going to go forward for the discussion at council, and I'm not sure, if we've got any more than a week or two. And she has sent the plan in as is. So we would have to amend the financial plan, which is fine. We can do that.
Yeah, I think
If the
that's
grant's
where-
not successful, we're back to the drawing board, so.
Yeah.
I don't really know what more to say than that.
God, we're on water.
Hmm.
Oh.
Understood. I heard something in the background.
I think that was Dale. He had accidentally muted himself. That's right.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so are we okay with the wording as it sets then? Is everybody okay with this?
Fine.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so Allison, does it meet your?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Excuse
I
me,
think it's fine with
Councilwoman?
Kristen. It's okay with you?
It is an accurate reflection of what will happen if the grant is not successful.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so motion to accept this, or do we make this motion? We
Mover,
need a
seconder.
seconder.
Yeah, so you can move it, Tim, and somebody else needs to second it.
Okay, so I'll move this proposal. Anybody second?
Second it, Len.
Len, thank you. So hands up in support. Steph, you got that?
You betcha.
All right,
Oh,
thank you.
it's always exciting when the vote finally happens.
Okay, so stop screen sharing now.
I can't,
Why not?
because it's always in a different monitor.
There we go. There we
There we
go. Okay, so now we go to moving on the agenda. Let me get back to the agenda itself. We had the update from Patrick. I do have a couple questions regarding the water system where we go into the sorry, I'm scrolling back to my agenda to get back on track here. We're on 6.1 now, still on the infrastructure update. I've got one comment and a question for Patrick. One comment would be, could we arrange, please, to have the water gauge stood up in the reservoir? Some point this winter, it has fallen into the water. And so we currently have no actual physical measuring device located. It's there, I can see it, but it's fully horizontal and at the bottom.
Was it accurate? I always wondered that. I mean, when it's understanding.
Even if it's not accurate as a specific,
It's a constant,
datum,
I get it. Yeah.
it's at least something that we can measure against and keep track of. And I know when I've gone up, I've appreciated having it. That was one. Two, I'm wondering if Patrick could also provide confirmation as to how our nighttime water flow readings are these days. Are we still at or near zero at the 4 a.m. benchmark? Sorry, you're muted, Patrick.
Yes, we haven't noticed any significant nighttime flows recently.
Perfect. Okay, so that's good news. We're still on track there. Thank you. Does anybody want or need any other infrastructure updates?
Yes. I want to just a simple question for the wells. What is the, what do you call it? When do we turn a well on if we reach a certain depth in the reservoir? And we say, oh, okay, we need to. Are the wells left off until the bitter end, or do they become part of the day-to-day operation? Patrick.
And you're muted. again.
They're a supplementary source. So when additional supply is needed to supplement the reservoir, the wells are used for that.
And
I don't know the specific thresholds. I don't have that information right now.
Oh, okay, okay. So, but do they run simultaneously, or do both run, or is there a one on, one off, one on? There, I heard some discussion of that, and
I'll have to confirm that and.
okay,
and get
I just,
back
it would
to you
just,
then.
okay, it's kind of one of those things just to know that, okay, that you can say to people, the wells are on now. So we're getting into, serious, it's just a way of having more clout with our neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah, I will make sure I give you the right answer on that.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other infrastructure related questions? Okay. Good. Thank you, Patrick, for that. Updates on the status of the Cove Bay water treatment plant. Patrick again.
So we have completed the, it's been a bit of a frustrating process, but we do have the retrofit and process modifications completed, resolved most of the equipment issues, and we're into commissioning. We still have to do repairs on one of the filter modules, but we expect to be operating in the next couple of weeks, and we can supply the system with the one module, and so it's imminent is the basic message. I don't really, unless there's specific questions about it, I don't know. We need to get any more into that.
Probably not. It's good to know that it is imminent, though it's been kind of laying at that state for quite a while, has it not?
Well, we are actually commissioning it now.
It's even more imminent. Okay, got it. Thanks. Okay, new business. Anything otherwise? Hearing none. I think we're next meeting is to be determined. Will probably be on the outcome of the grant submission, yay or nay. I'm assuming we would reconvene. Yes, no, yes.
Yes.
Being nods. Okay, so that'll be the deciding factor on the next meeting. I think we're motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Yeah, I move to adjourn.
Len seconds. All in favor? We're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
everybody.
Nice to see you
Thanks,
again.
guys.
Everybody.
Thanks, Kristen. Everybody.
Good night.
Enjoy